Now I'm back talking about cost. We're going to start, well, first of all, I want to say for the rest of the semester, we're talking about supply side and producers, firms, and how they're making decisions. So we're not really focusing on demand or consumers anymore. This is all going to be on firms and production. So this chapter 9, is just on cost in general. These relate to any type of firm, whether they're large, they're small, they're international, whatever the case is. And we're going to talk about differences later on, but this is the same for any firm. And we're going to start in what we call the short run. The short run is a time period. Although we can't say an actual amount of time, like a year or a year and a half or anything like that, because it's going to be different for every firm. There's a time period. And that time period is going to have two types of cost: fixed cost and variable cost. The fixed costs are going to be the cost that you have for a fixed input, and the variable costs are for variable inputs. So typically we think about, in the short run, maybe we have a fixed factory size or fixed plant size your book uses. I'm going to put plant, but we can say factory. And if we're a business, again, any kind of size, we have a factory. Well, if we own the factory, we probably have a mortgage on it. If we're renting, we probably have a lease. And those things have time periods. You have to be in the building, or you have to rent the building out for a year. That's what your lease says. Or, your mortgage might be longer, obviously. So if we wanted to change the size of our factory, if we wanted to expand and get one that's twice the size, or if we want to contract and get one that's smaller or shut down altogether, well, it's not easy to do right now. We have to either wait out our lease. We also have to find this factory, this new one, and it takes time. So this would be an example of fixed cost. So rent might be one that we'd say, put this here. This is all fixed cost. As I said in the other video, my stylus, it's really bad right now. I'm not really sure what's going on with it. That's not good. I don't think my screen likes me writing on it so much. All right, so I'll just explain some of this and then hopefully figure out what's going on. But the short run has these fixed costs. One could be rent or the lease that you have. It could be the insurance that you have to pay. And the fixed cost is just a price or just a cost that you have to pay no matter what. Whether you're producing 1,000,000 units or just one unit, whether you're thinking of moving your plant or whatever, you still have to pay the fixed cost. Now, the variable costs are things that change very quickly. So this might be the number of workers you have, especially if they're not, under like salary or something like that. So maybe one day you have 10 workers, the next day you have 15, next day you have 7. You can change that fairly easily. Other things that might be variable are things that go into production. In the last video, I talked about making sundaes. So we're producing sundaes, and the ingredients like ice cream or milk and sugar and chocolate chips and sprinkles, those would be considered variable costs. When you have more customers and you're selling more ice cream, well, you're going to need more of these things in order to actually produce more sundaes. If you don't have a lot of customers, though, you don't need to buy a lot of them. So they vary depending on how many sundaes you're going to sell or how much output you're selling. And I wanted to show you on the left-hand side some equations. So these might seem a little bit tricky or just scary even, but you can these aren't too bad. So first of all, we have what's called total cost. That's the total price you're paying for everything. And that just equals variable cost plus your fixed cost. The marginal cost is this change in total cost. Like we did with marginal product of labor in the other video, this is the same idea. We're thinking about how does total cost change when maybe we're selling an extra unit of ice cream, an extra sundae. And then we have some average costs. So the last three, average total is where you take the total. This tells you what to take. You take the total cost, you divide it by the quantity of output. I'll show you on a table what that looks like. Average variable is where you're just taking the variable cost and dividing it by Q. Average fixed cost over Q. All right, let's see if my stylus will work. So this is an example that I just created. It's not in your book, but just a little simple one. You'll be able to see more on Connect and their PowerPoint. You can also do that Learn Smart book to get more practice. So first of all, we see this is a fairly empty table. We only have total cost. And our output is Q 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're still going up by ones, which is good. Marginal cost, an average cost of 0. Remember, it's just a dash. So we want to think about now how to solve all these. So let's solve left to right, starting with fixed cost and variable cost. That'll probably be easiest for us, I think at least. So one thing to remember about maybe the relationship of fixed cost and total cost is that fixed costs don't change. They're fixed at a certain number. And they're that price or that amount for any amount we're selling. So here, okay, sorry about that. Just ignore me. This is going to be one number all the way down. Our variable costs, though, they do vary. And we can say at 0 units, our variable cost is always 0. Another variable cost, we talked about labor. So if we're not making anything, we don't need to pay our workers. And another one could be electricity. We're not making any sundaes. We don't need to turn on the machines. So our costs for that are 0. Since we know fixed plus variable has to equal total cost, well, fixed cost must be 20. And that number is the same all the way down. You don't need to change it. 20, 20, 20. Now what changes is our variable cost. And we can find that just by taking total cost when subtracting our fixed cost, or 20. Just rearranging that total cost equation. So 40 minus 20 is 20. 55 minus 20 is 35. 65 minus 20 is 45. 85 minus 20, 65, and then 95. That's not too bad, right? So let's look at marginal cost. Again, this is the same as marginal product of labor. We're just looking at total cost. So we want to see how total cost changes when our quantity changes. Just goes by 1. So our total cost at 0 is 20, but at 1 unit, 1 sundae, we go to $40. That change, or that difference, is 40 minus 20, and that's just 20, right? And we keep doing the same thing. On the next row, we take that total cost, 55, and subtract what's above it, 40. So this is going to be 15. And then we're going to have 65 minus 55, and that's 10. Then 85 minus 65 is 20. And then 115 minus 85 is 30. For the most part, marginal costs fall a little bit and then pick back up. A lot of times you'll see them looking like a check mark. You can go back and see the graph in your book. It looks something like that. Now, average cost is, again, total cost dividing by Q. And I just put average cost. So this AC also equals average total. And I'm sorry, I changed up my notation. But that's the same thing. I could have asked you for average fixed, average variable, and you would just take each of these and divide by the quantity. Each of these meaning fixed cost and variable costs. Sorry, I forget you're not here. But I just asked for average total cost because the technique is all the same, or the math that we do is all the same. So we take the total cost at 1, which was 40, and we divide by 1, the amount of output. And so that's easy, that's 40. The next one is 55. So costs went up, and we also are selling more. We sold 2 sundaes. We have 55 divided by 2, and that's 27.5. And then we keep going. So 65 over 3 is 21.67. And then I'm just going to give you the other ones here because I think you can figure it out, but you can always check yourself. You should typically round to 2 decimal places if you need to. Your book, a lot of times, is going to have multiple choice questions, so find the one that's closest, but it should be very close to your answer. So these are all of the costs, finding these costs. Average cost also starts out higher, goes lower, and then increases. But it looks more like a U than like a check mark for marginal cost. So just want to notice these little differences. And I think that's it for short run costs. Next video is going to be long run costs. And I have to just stop videos like this because I have a time limit on my the app I'm using. All right, so talk to you soon.